Coming up on 5 Minute News. US files war crimes charges against Russians in Ukraine invasion. Trump refuses to rule out abusing power if he returns to White House. And US plastic bag recycling directory site taken down after abysmal failure. It's Wednesday, December 6. I'm Anthony Davis. The Justice Department today said it has filed war crime charges against 4 members of the Russian military accused of abducting and torturing an American during the invasion of Ukraine, in a case that's the first of its kind. The 4 Russians are accused of kidnapping the American from his home in a Ukrainian village last year. The American was beaten and interrogated while being held for 10 days at a Russian military compound before eventually being evacuated with his wife, who is Ukrainian, US authorities said. The American told federal agents who had traveled to Ukraine last year as part of an investigation that the Russian soldiers had abducted him, stripped him naked, pointed a gun at his head and badly beaten him, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said. The case marks the first time the US has filed war crime charges in the victimization of an American, he said. Homeland Security and FBI investigators interviewed the American, his family, and others who were around the village of Milov around the time of the kidnapping to identify the 4 Russians. Attorney General Merrick Garland has been outspoken on war crimes in Ukraine since Russia's invasion began in February 2022. Independent human rights experts backed by the US have said they found continued evidence of war crimes committed by Russian forces, including torture that ended in death and rape of women aged up to 83 years old. The disgraced former President Donald Trump declined to rule out abusing power if he returns to the White House after the Fox News host Sean Hannity asked him last night to respond to growing Democratic criticism of his rhetoric. The GOP presidential frontrunner has talked about targeting his rivals, referring to them as vermin, and vowed to seek retribution if he wins a second term for what he argues are politically motivated prosecutions against him. As Trump has dominated the Republican presidential primary, President Joe Biden has stepped up his own warnings, contending Trump is determined to destroy American democracy. Under no circumstances you are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody, Hannity asked Trump in the interview taped in Davenport, Iowa. Except for day one, Trump responded. Trump then repeated his assertion. I love this guy, he said to the Fox News host. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. Earlier in the interview, Hannity had asked Trump if he in any way had any plans whatsoever to abuse power, to break the law, to use the government to go after people. Trump replied, you mean like they're using right now. Trump's campaign rhetoric and sweeping plans for a second term include firing large swathes of the federal bureaucracy and targeting his rivals, have alarmed Democrats and become a chief election argument for Biden as he prepares for a potential rematch against Donald Trump. Hannity, a longtime Trump supporter and advisor, has often seemed to use his interviews to coach the former president to say things that will benefit him politically. The questions yesterday appeared to be another example of those efforts. A national online recycling directory for plastic bags and films has been taken offline 6 months after an investigation by ABC News found some materials were ending up in landfill, incinerators, and other waste facilities. The directory previously directed users to some 18,000 store drop-off locations around the country where they could bring used plastic bags and packaging to be recycled, including Walmart and Target locations. The initiative was promoted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and local and state governments across the country. In May, digital tracking devices were used to monitor plastic waste dropped off at Walmart and Target stores. Of the 46 trackers placed, the vast majority never ended up at locations associated with plastic bag recycling. Plastics are a major contributor to the climate crisis. Made from oil and gas, the materials are set to drive nearly half of oil demand growth by mid-century, according to the US International Energy Agency. Producing the materials requires fossil fuel extraction, refining and cracking in special high-heat facilities, and plastic waste often ends up in landfills and waste incinerators. Each step produces planet heating and toxic emissions. Industry interests have long insisted that plastic recycling can be improved, yet report after report shows recycling is failing to rein in the problem. Plastic waste is also a major contributor to terrestrial and marine pollution and can leach toxins into the environment. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.